Silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of gathering storms. They mistook your silence for surrender. Now they'll witness your rise. When you stop explaining, you start commanding. Quiet minds carry the sharpest blades. Power doesn't shout. It waits, watches, and strikes. The loudest in the room is rarely the strongest. Still waters cut the deepest. You disappeared, not to escape, but to evolve. Your absence will echo louder than their noise. Let your silence become the scream of your transformation. Silence is a loaded gun. It only speaks when it's time to end things. Calm is a weapon, and you've mastered it. Behind every quiet person is a storm they tamed. The wolf doesn't howl when it hunts. You became what they feared, calm, focused, and unbreakable. You don't need to be seen. You need to be unstoppable. They talk. You act. That's why you win. Your silence is the warning. Your actions are the consequence. The ones who say less often carry the most power. The less you reveal, the harder you are to break. People fear what they can't understand. And you've made yourself unreadable. In silence, you sharpen your edge. Let them wonder what you're thinking. That's your advantage. You owe no one an explanation for your comeback. You disappeared. Now return with thunder. Your silence was never empty. It was sacred. Stay quiet. Let your scars do the talking. There's nothing more terrifying than a calm person with a dark past. You stopped talking because you're too focused on building. They won't see it coming because you made silence your camouflage. Stand still, long enough, and the world exposes itself to you. They called you quiet, but you were listening to every lie, every move. You walked away, not because you're weak, but because destruction requires distance. You became a shadow, so you could become the storm. Their noise only proves your silence holds power. You trained in silence. Now move like a ghost with vengeance. When you become unreadable, you become unstoppable. You stopped arguing. That was the first sign of your evolution. Not everything needs to be spoken. Some things are better left as shock. You don't make announcements. You make impacts. The most dangerous ones always smile in silence. You're not antisocial. You're anti-bullshit. You're not cold. You've just seen too much. People try to break what they can't control. That's why they feared your silence. You say nothing, but your presence is louder than their screams. The silent ones have already fought wars in their mind. They judged you in your silence, and now they'll kneel in your roar. Keep your plans quiet. Let your results make the noise. When your energy is calm, your aim becomes deadly. The ones who talk least have the most to offer. They mocked your silence. Now, they fear your growth. Silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes it means preparation. You lost friends because you found focus. That's not loss. That's clarity. You were never quiet. You were calculating. They think you've vanished. Truth is, you've just leveled up in shadows. You don't owe them your energy. You owe yourself your evolution. Let them underestimate you. That's the first step in their downfall. You became silent, and suddenly the world got louder. You grew, quietly. That's why they didn't see you coming. Don't speak. Just execute. You're not ignoring the world. You're building one that doesn't need its noise. The quieter you become, the stronger your vision gets. They fear what they can't label. That's your power. Silence gives you the clearest view of who's really making noise. You didn't shut down. You shut them out. Silence is the only reply some people deserve. Keep moving in silence until your success makes the announcement. You left the crowd to become the storm. They thought you broke. You were just rebuilding in peace. Let your absence create the loudest noise. Discipline isn't loud. It's invisible until it's undeniable. Don't just grow, outgrow. Not every storm screams. Some destroy silently. You don't explain your path to those who never walked it. In silence, you found power no noise could match. A quiet mind is a battlefield that's already won. You faded so you could rise untouchable. Your silence isn't absence. It's a strategy. They won't recognize you. That was the plan. You became your own shelter in the storm. Silence is the forge of inner beasts. Don't tell your story. Let them feel it. You didn't walk away. You outgrew the noise. The more they talk, the less they build. You're not hiding. You're becoming. Some disappear to escape. You disappeared to evolve. The dark made you silent. The silence made you dangerous. People talk when they're weak. Warriors plan in silence. The less they know, the more they fear. You stopped explaining because your mission became sacred. They forgot you. That was their mistake. Silence wasn't giving up. It was gearing up. Let them think you're done, then crush them in silence. You were built in the dark. You owe no one your light. They tried to silence you, but silence became your weapon. You walked away not to run, but to strike differently. The past doesn't haunt you. It trained you. Your distance is your defense. Don't warn them. Show them. Sometimes disappearing is the loudest statement. You became ruthless by being ignored. They hurt you. You healed quietly. You stayed quiet and came back colder. People wonder why you're distant, because closeness taught you pain. You speak less now, because peace taught you value. When the world shouted, you listened, and now you dominate, in silence. Nothing is more terrifying than a focused, silent warrior. You made peace your weapon, and it's deadlier than rage. You stopped explaining yourself the moment you realized you were unstoppable. When you stopped needing approval, you started becoming lethal. The world doubted you. You didn't reply. You rebuilt. What they don't see is what they can't stop. Silence made you unreadable. Strength made you untouchable. Let them gossip. You're building empires in the quiet. Stillness is where monsters are made. Quiet doesn't mean kind. Sometimes it means calculated. You're no longer soft. You're steel in silence. They can't fight what they can't predict. You rose with no applause. Now let the results roar. Never defend your silence. It's your most dangerous gift. They'll realize too late that your silence was a warning. Your strength is built from every ignored cry and quiet breakdown. You were never broken, just undiscovered. You stayed quiet, and the silence taught you survival. You learned more by listening than they ever did by speaking. Your silence is the graveyard of your old self. They think you lost your voice, but you found your purpose. Silence is how warriors pray. Let them scream. You'll strike when it matters. You don't chase noise. You wait for the perfect silence to move. They never heard you coming. That's why you win. When you said nothing, you heard everything. Your silence holds secrets louder than any confession. You stopped sharing because you outgrew explanations. The quieter you are, the more powerful your presence becomes. Let them misjudge you. Shadows never beg for the spotlight. You walked through hell silently and came back forged. They heard nothing, but you were becoming everything. You don't whisper because you're scared. You whisper because you're deadly. You sat alone, but you weren't lonely. You were focused. Pain taught you the language of silence. You chose isolation over fake support. That was strength. You used silence not to hide, but to hunt. Let your moves be made in silence, and your victories be felt in thunder. You're not silent by accident. You're silent by design. You took the pain, the silence, the solitude, and turned them into fire. They forgot your name. Now they'll remember your storm. Don't try to explain silence. Let the world feel it. Your growth happened when no one was watching. Silence gave you clarity. Clarity gave you direction. You stopped arguing with fools. That's when you became dangerous. You suffered in silence. Now rise in power. The most unstoppable people are forged in stillness. They laughed when you vanished. They'll weep when you return. You outgrew their noise and built your empire in quiet. Let them think you're done. Then detonate your success. The storm didn't break you. It sharpened your silence. Quiet people create the loudest shockwaves. Your peace cost you everything. And it was worth it. You said nothing, but your presence silenced the room. They left you alone. That's where you found your power. Your past was pain. Your silence is strategy. Silence isn't retreat. It's reloading. The fewer people you speak to, the stronger you become. You shut the world out and opened the gates within. Your silence isn't absence. It's elevation. You walked away not to run, but to rise. They tried to label you. So you became undefined. Let your quiet be a threat. The ones who stay silent have survived the loudest battles. You didn't isolate. You upgraded. Your calm isn't soft. It's sharpened steel. You speak with silence. They won't forget the sound. You're not avoiding people. You're attracting your destiny. They thought you were weak because you whispered. Now they hear the roar behind it. Some monsters are silent until provoked. You don't flex your strength. You weaponize it in silence. Let them laugh at your quiet. They'll regret your echo. They pushed you away. Now they watch from below. You found peace in places they ran from. Your strength is not in what you say, but in what you endure. You vanished to protect your evolution. They want noise. You bring shock. A quiet soul is a dangerous storm. They never saw it coming, because you made silence your shield. When you stop reacting, you start controlling. You created chaos with your calm. They underestimated you, because you chose silence over spectacle. You don't speak often, but when you do, it changes everything. You gave them silence. Now they crave your voice. You mastered the art of being alone, and now no one can break you. Let your solitude be the soil where power grows. You aren't hiding. You're hardening. Silence is the signal before dominance. You stepped back, not to surrender, but to sharpen. You trained in isolation so you could conquer in public. They won't understand your silence until it breaks them. Let your stillness be a weapon. You sacrificed attention for transformation. You don't need the world's permission to become a storm. They talk too much. You built in silence. You didn't need to be seen. You needed to evolve. They forgot you existed. Now they'll remember who rules. You made peace with being misunderstood. Your quiet is where your demons bowed. You didn't lose your voice. You leveled up beyond language. Some beasts grow in cages, others in silence. You were absent for a reason, to destroy without mercy. You didn't disappear. You became untouchable. You stopped caring about their noise when you found your calling. Your silence is a countdown. They couldn't break you, so they pretend you're gone. You vanished into your own mind and came back lethal. Let your distance teach them what your presence meant. You were never alone. You were preparing. They didn't hear your pain. They'll feel your success. You don't have to announce your power. It walks with you. Let your energy be the voice they remember. You walked away not to retreat, but to rewrite everything. They feared your silence more than your words. You found strength in every second you stayed quiet. You didn't quit. You just stopped explaining your war. Silence trained you. Now power obeys you. You built in silence what they couldn't imagine in noise. The quieter your journey, the louder your legacy. They see peace, but beneath it lies fire. You didn't want revenge, just evolution. You no longer defend yourself. You deliver results. They noticed your silence too late. You faced demons in silence and returned unshaken. They think you're done. But you're just silent, sharpening your aim. Your presence was never loud, but it was unforgettable. You grew in places where others gave up. You silenced your chaos to build something stronger. No one saw you cry. That's why they fear your calm. You used pain as fuel, silence as fire. They can't fight what they can't hear coming. Your silence broke louder than their lies. Let them assume you're weak. Your actions will correct them. You chose distance not to escape, but to upgrade. They missed your words. Now they'll feel your storm. You became your own ally when no one else stood by. You embraced silence and became immortal. Let your discipline scream through every quiet second. You weren't born for applause, but for conquest. Your silence roared, louder than their pride. You burned in silence, and now you rise as flame. You never needed a voice to command a room. You healed in silence and came back dangerous. They see a calm face. They don't see the war you won to earn it. Your stillness is a battlefield. Silence was your painkiller. Power was the side effect. You stopped sharing because you started building. You turned your silence into armor. Your past was noise. Your future is silence and strength. You were forged in shadows. Now you blind them with your glow. They feared your silence because it meant you weren't finished. You outlasted storms by being still. They can't figure you out. That's why they whisper. You speak less because you've seen more. You survived what they wouldn't dare face. You don't need to be loud to be unforgettable. They disrespected your silence. Now they'll respect your results. You took solitude and made it your sanctuary. You didn't beg for understanding. You became undeniable. Let your quiet shake the world. You moved in silence. Now your arrival is an earthquake. You escaped their cage, in silence, with fire in your heart. They never saw your growth, but they'll feel your greatness. You kept quiet so you could keep winning. Your silence didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. They broke your trust. You broke your limits. You were patient, not passive. You stopped proving. You started ascending. Your peace intimidates those addicted to chaos. You mastered self. Now nothing can master you. You endured in silence. Now speak through domination. You looked away, and that was power. You gave them nothing, and that was everything. Let your peace be the loudest message. You no longer wait. You work. They used to ignore you. Now they study you. You turned every wound into a weapon. Your silence speaks a language the loud will never understand. You don't announce evolution. You walk in it. They buried you in silence. not knowing you were a seed. Let your focus destroy their doubt. You stayed silent because your results will do the talking. You didn't fall behind. You rose without noise. You don't speak often, because legends don't need to explain. You made peace with the pain, and power followed. They lost access, not relevance. You isolated to elevate. You let go of the world to find your fire. You gave up noise and found your next level. They thought you needed them. You needed distance. Your silence isn't empty. It's evolving. You rewrote your story in silence. They mocked your absence. Now they mimic your presence. You walked alone and found everything. You were silent because noise distracts kings. You turned stillness into strength. Let them chase clout. You chase conquest. You didn't stop. You became selective. You're not hiding. You're rising. You weren't forgotten, just focused. They think you lost, but you just learned who not to carry. You vanished to build something too big for their sight. Your silence cut deeper than their insults. They filled rooms with words. You filled worlds with silence. You moved without warning and conquered without asking. You used isolation to upgrade your soul. You stopped reacting and started building. You were calm because chaos is beneath you. Let your progress haunt. Those who left you, they misjudged your silence. Now they fear your movement. You made solitude a sanctuary and strength your shield. The world talks, but you move. You stopped chasing. Now they can't catch up. Your silence is thunder waiting for the right sky. You suffered quietly, now dominate loudly. You stepped into silence and found power waiting. Let them forget your words. They'll never forget your silence. You gave no updates, only upgrades. You burned quietly. Now blaze with purpose. You erased the noise and built your empire. You left the noise to find your true sound. You didn't disappear. You evolved where they couldn't see. You became dangerous the moment you embraced your silence. Let them talk. You're too busy becoming the storm. You stayed silent. Now your presence is louder than ever. You don't respond anymore. You rebuild. You healed quietly and came back unrecognizable. They doubted your silence. Now they fear your strength. You lost nothing. You shed what was weak. You said nothing, because power doesn't beg. You disappeared into focus and returned as a force. They mistook your calm for weakness. Now they kneel. You waited in the shadows. Now the spotlight hunts you. You don't shout revenge. You deliver success. Your absence was your evolution. You turned your pain into purpose without a sound. They forgot you. Now they study your silence. You learned to thrive without applause. You didn't respond. You rose. You are the storm, silence prepared. You let the silence shape you. Now you shape worlds. You withdrew not to escape, but to ignite. They didn't see you cry. That's why they fear your calm. Your stillness speaks volumes the world can't silence. You didn't chase revenge. You became the proof. They underestimated your distance. You were building an empire in your absence. You stopped speaking, and your energy took over. Let your silence shake the room. You turned every scar into a silent scream of strength. Your quiet phase was your most powerful. You stepped back and became unstoppable. They mocked your stillness. Now they fear your steps. You mastered the art of walking away with dignity. You removed your voice so they could hear your power. You left the noise to find your soul. You don't break, you bend and build. They heard nothing. Now they feel everything. You vanished. Not to hide, but to upgrade. You survived what they joked about. You fell silently and rose like thunder. They talk. You transform. Your silence is the edge they didn't see coming. You lost your weakness in silence. You gave no warnings, just consequences. You became more when you spoke less. You don't need to explain your silence. It's sacred. You outgrew their noise. They called it isolation. You called it evolution.